In this lesson, we will discuss about the law, the conscience, and the sanctions of law. We have already proved that man is accountable for his free acts. This is a judgment of the common sense of mankind. But it also recognizes and reveals as decreed by the sovereign will a rule outside and independent of us, according to which our actions ought to be directed. Now, a rule directive of action is called law, the word being used in its widest sense. Thus, for example, the laws of physical nature are rules in accordance with which the actions of material things are directed. But in a stricter sense, the term law expresses the direction of free acts, and as such, it is a rule directive of human acts. So we will consider this chapter, the moral law in general, the application of the moral law by conscience, and the sanction of the moral law. So as we have said, a law is a rule directive of human acts. Still more explicitly defined, a law is an ordinance of reason which is for the common good and has been promulgated by one having charge of the community. As doubt may sometimes arise whether a given enactment is really a law and has the force of a law, a careful examination of every word in this definition is in order. When we talk a law is an ordinance of reason, it proceeds as an ordinance from the will of the lawgiver after it has originated in his intellect. He perceives a right course of action which is useful or necessary, and he wills to impose an obligation on those who are subject to his decrees to follow this course of action. So law is distinguished from mere counsel by the note of obligation. Still, the law has no other binding force than the ruler intended. So when we talk about the law for the common good, a law is imposed on the general community, not on individuals, though it does not necessarily affect the actions of all individuals composing the community, but only certain classes, for example, merchants, lawyers, taxpayers, voters, etc. Nevertheless, the effect intended must redound to the common good. It is manifest that a law cannot be enacted except by the person, physical or moral, that has charge of the whole community. By his position, such a one is bound to direct all the members of the community to the common good. And as the enactment of laws is a necessary means to this end, he has the right, and he alone, of making laws. Promulgation is essential for the obligation of a law, so that without this, even if the lawgiver should wish the immediate observance of an ordinance, there is no binding force. The reason is very apparent. A law is directive of human acts, but without promulgation, a law cannot be the subject of human acts because an essential requisite, the knowledge needed for such an act, is wanting. A law decreed by Almighty God is a divine law. One established by man is a human law. Those laws for human conduct which God, having once decreed creation, necessarily enacts in accordance with that decree, constitute the so-called the natural law. Those which God or man freely enacts are positive laws. Now we will talk about the natural law in general. The natural law, unlike positive laws, does not depend upon the free will of God. Its requirements flow from the intrinsic difference between right and wrong, which is determined by the very essences of things. Hence, under this law, certain acts are not evil primarily because they are forbidden, but they are forbidden because in themselves they are evil. Consequently, the natural law is the same at all times, in all places, and for all persons, but this is not true of positive laws, which may be changed with changing circumstances or if the lawgiver so wills it, even without change of circumstances. The natural law emanates from God alone, but positive laws may be enacted by men. The natural law is promulgated through the light of reason. Positive laws require for their promulgation a sign external to man. As a consequence of the foregoing, the natural law may be defined as the ordinance of divine wisdom, which is made known to us by reason and which requires the observance of the moral order. It may also be defined to be the eternal law as far as it made known by human reason. By the eternal law, we mean all that God necessarily decrees from eternity. That part of the eternal law which reason reveals as directive of human acts we call the natural law. A universal formula which contains in brief expression of the whole natural law is this: keep the moral order or observe right order in your actions. Some writers state it simply as do good and avoid evil. Now, the right order of human acts consists evidently in the proper direction to man's last end, which is subjectively his perfect beatitude and objectively, of course, God himself. God must direct his free creatures to their last end. Hence, he commands them to observe the moral order and forbids them to depart from it. When we talk about conscience and conscience applying the moral law, conscience is the human intellect applying the general principles of morals to individual acts. The term means not an examination into one's past deeds, but a judgment on acts about to be performed. In judging whether an individual act is morally good or evil, the intellect forms, explicitly or implicitly, a syllogism, the major of which is a known principle of morality, the minor a particular fact, and the conclusion a practical judgment, which is called the dictate of conscience. For instance, a lie is never allowed, but to say that I have never sinned would be a lie. Therefore, I am not allowed to say that I have never sinned. Conscience, then, may be defined as a practical judgment formed by reasoning from a universal principle to a particular fact, whereby I decide whether a certain individual act ought to be done or omitted, or whether it may be done or omitted at my choice. So my conscience, with regard to any particular act, may be correct or erroneous. Its judgment may be certain or doubtful. The doubt may be concerning a law or a fact. A doubtful judgment is called an opinion. The reasons in favor of an opinion constitute its probability. In matters pertaining to conscience, we can seldom have the strictest certitude, such namely as excludes all possibility of error. However, moral certitude which excludes a prudent doubt is sufficient to safeguard moral rectitude. Hence, a certain dictate of conscience means a practical judgment free from prudent doubt in regard to error. Moreover, it may happen that two honest men act in diametrically opposite ways, about the same matter, and each may be morally certain that he is right. If I make a mistake through no fault of my own, my judgment is erroneous, though it may be morally certain. In such case, I am said to be invisibly ignorant of the truth. If, however, the error is due to my own fault, my ignorance is visible. Conscience is said to be doubtful when the motive for believing that a particular law does not exist or it is not applicable to the case in hand is based on an opinion or more or less probable, that is, more or less well-founded. So an opinion is likely or barely probable when it rests on very weak motives. It is probable or plausible when supported by solid reasons. Those stronger reasons may uphold the contradictory opinion. It is equally probable with the contradictory opinion when both are supported by equally plausible reasons. And it is more probable when the reasons favoring the opinion are stronger than those opposed to it. And it is most probable when the arguments on which it rests are very strong, while those for the contradictory opinion are very weak. Conscience, when certain, must be obeyed, whether it be correct or invisibly erroneous. So we are bound to obey the law rationally, that is, as our intellect makes known to us the application of the law. But when conscience is certain, our intellect makes known to us the application of the law with certainty, whether our judgment in the matter be correct or invisibly erroneous. Therefore, conscience, when certain, must be obeyed, whether it be correct or invisibly erroneous. Doubt as affecting conscience is either speculative or practical. It is a practical doubt if it regards the formal licity of a particular act which is about to be performed. Hence, if I act with a practical doubt, I do not know whether or not I am doing wrong and displeasing God. For example, everything considered, I am in doubt whether I shall do wrong by reading a certain book which I have reason to think is dangerous, especially to our faith. So doubt is speculative when it concerns the premises of a syllogism, the conclusion of which is a dictate of conscience. So when certain end is absolutely to be secured, we must choose the safer way of securing it. So the sanction of a law is the provision of reward for the observance of the law and of punishment for its violation. So when that sanction is perfect, it means it is sufficient to make it a matter of everyone's highest interest to observe the law. But if the sanction falls short of this, it is said to be imperfect. So there is an imperfect sanction actually in this life. We know from the experiences of mankind that the observance of the natural law usually brings with it certain forms of happiness, such as peace of mind, friendship, honor, a fair supply of earthly possessions, among others, and that frequent violation of the law entails all of life's miseries, such as disquiet of mind, dishonor, poverty, disease, and often an early death. So hence it is evident that the natural law has some sanction in this life, but we know that this sanction is very imperfect. Oftentimes, the virtuous endure great misery in this life, while on the other hand, evildoers are often comparatively prosperous and apparently triumphant in their wickedness. Moreover, the perfect sanction of the law requires that the rewards held out for its observance should exceed as recompense all inconvenience and suffering that may be incurred by observing the law, and that the penalties threatened should be greater than any emoluments or advantages that may be obtained by violating the law. So now, what reward, for example, can be given in this life to a man that dies for the truth? Is it the renown of a noble deed? But death makes the enjoyment of renown on earth an impossibility for him. Or again, does the weak remorse of the apostate match the advantage which his base denial of the faith has gained in the preservation of his life? Therefore, the rewards and punishments of this life do not conform or do not form a perfect sanction of the natural law. A perfect sanction may happen in the next life. I hope you have learned something about the law, the conscience, applying the moral law, and the sanctions in observance or violation of the law.